Thank you very much. So we promised you fresh formats. And if I'm honest, this is a format that we're going to go through next that I've been pretty excited for quite a long time. I think it's a very good way to explore a topic. So we're going to have a debate. We're going to have two teams come up and explore a question. So do you remember at the start of the day that I asked you to get your telephones out? Do you remember this? You remember this. And we asked you to vote on a very simple question. Well, throughout the debate today, we're going to ask you a question again. And we want your input. And we want to see if we can sway your opinion during the debate. So can we get the poll up again? It's pollev.com/Rico. And there should hopefully be a question there. And you can vote around the topic, great coffee, does it scale? So before we begin, I want to gauge the sentiment of the audience. So get up there, get on your phones, get on your laptops. I mean, don't do both at once, that's cheating. But vote once, be good, and let's see what you think. I'll be honest, this is not what I expected from the room to start with. This is good. All right, let's give you 30 seconds more. And while you finish off voting, I'm going to head to the back here. And I'm going to introduce our teams who will be debating, or our team members. So, proposing the motion that great coffee does scale, please welcome back up to the stage once more, Nick Tolley, who you heard this morning. Please. Joining Nick is one of our fellows here today. You're probably very familiar, thank you, with Katie Carguilo, US Barista Champion. She's a quality analyst in the Bay Area with Counterculture Coffee. So please welcome Katie to the stage. Come on over. And opposing the motion, hoping to change a good number of your minds, please welcome back Sara Morrochhi, who you heard speak this morning. And I'm also going to welcome to the stage buyer consultant, I'll introduce him properly tomorrow, Chad Trewick. Take a seat, teams, relax. So the way the format's going to work is this, and you do get to participate as well, so get your questions ready. Each team will have a 4-minute moment to propose or put forward their arguments. At that point, there'll be a short crossfire between the teams. Each speaker can ask the other questions. Then we'll move to the second speakers who'll again rebut each other's arguments. At the end of that, we're going to poll you again. Then you get to ask some questions. Right now, we're starting at 76-24. No more voting for now. So no more voting for now. So to propose the motion, there we go, that great coffee does scale. Which of you is speaking first today? Katie Carguilo. So 4 minutes on the clock. I hand this over to you. All yours.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here. I'm Katie and I am on team Great Coffee Can Scale. And when we are talking about the making or breaking of greatness in coffee, we're actually talking about 3 times that can happen. In green production, in roasting, and in brewing. And what my team is going to argue today is that at each of these points, scale is actually a catalyst for making coffee great. So a good example of this being applied to green coffee is through the story of coffee in Rwanda. Before the Pearl Project started there in the year 2000, there was no specialty coffee being produced in Rwanda. And this wasn't because there wasn't great coffee growing there, it's because they lacked the post-harvest processing systems to be able to make that coffee specialty. And the plan was to introduce systems for washing coffee, not with a depulper at each coffee farm, but rather with centralized washing stations, concentrating their resources to be able to produce great quality coffee in scale that would attract buyers willing to pay prices far above the traditional prices paid. Because for millions of smallholder farmers around the world, the economics of producing quality coffee doesn't make sense until you're talking about scale. You know, if a farmer has 3 hectares of land, why would he or she want to take on debt to buy a depulper, build fermentation tanks, and drying tables if they're only going to produce and sell a couple of bags of coffee? What does make sense is for farmers to group together, to form cooperatives that give them access to equipment and resources, putting them in a better position to market their coffee and export it in quantity quickly. And for the small-scale farmers out there that do own their own equipment, but maybe don't belong to an association that helps them market their coffee, they can really suffer from low prices because a lot of these coffees are purchased by local buyers who pay lower prices because they have to, in turn, mitigate the risk that they are taking on in needing to sell that coffee later. When this is the case, it doesn't make sense for farmers to put a lot of effort into producing a great quality product. And if at the end of the day, the prices for that product are going to ultimately be the same. So there's so much coffee out there, there's so much potential for coffees to move from the category of okay to great if we can just leverage the benefits of working in scale. On the roasting side, I think the biggest argument that I can make is that there isn't a quality benefit to roasting small quantities of coffee, 1 kilo at a time versus 70 kilos at a time. You should trust me, I'm a sample roaster. I roast 100 grams of coffee at a time, and the roasts that I produce don't have anything on the roast that my production roaster produce. And this isn't just because of the equipment, it's because our roaster, the person, gets to work with that coffee time and time again over its lifespan. He gets to roast dozens of batches of coffee a day. And in this case, him working in scale makes the learning curve for roasting much steeper. There's also quality of life investments that become much more affordable when you are dealing with a roasting operation of scale, things that make working with 70 kilo bags of coffee less of a physical challenge. So a scaled operation provides a better roasting environment, better trained professionals, and better coffee. So lastly, brewing. Coffee people often say that there's nothing that can be done at the point of brewing to make the quality of coffee greater, that you can really just maintain what has been given to you there. And I'm not totally sold on that idea. I think that's a topic that could be debated another day. But I do recognize that there's a lot at stake at this point in the stage for this process to be executed well, especially when we are considering getting consumer buy-in. So Nick is going to go deeper into this topic later, but we believe that businesses of a certain size have systems in place to support these efforts, from things like training programs to human resources that really go to the benefit of great coffee.
Exactly on time. That was very impressive. Thank you very much. Are you prepared to present your arguments?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Katie. Thanks for your perspective. To me, great coffee does not scale. And when I talk about great coffee, I assume that it's coffee that catches a premium over the C market price. When we talk about scalability, I think that the conversation really requires a conversation around profitability. A business can scale if it's profitable. And I think there is a huge problem with profitability at the production level, at origin. So an average coffee farmer grows coffee on less than 1.5 hectares of land. So purely from a volume perspective, already that's not scalable. He's not going to scale on that. And so the argument follows, well, that's when great coffee comes in. You should focus, the farmer should try to focus on quality instead of volume. That's where his competitive edge will come from. And that concerns me because in reality, I believe, in my experience, that most coffee farmers don't quite know exactly what their cost of productions are. They have a good sense of what certain costs are. They know what the cost of inputs is at any given point. They know what cost of farming tools is at any given point. But they often overlook some of the hidden costs, like think of labor costs, house labor costs. So what happens is that when they enter negotiations with their immediate buyer, whether it's an intermediary or a cooperative, they go in that negotiation not really knowing what their cost of productions are, and therefore they can't determine what the break-even price is. And so because they don't necessarily know what their break-even price is, I think that sometimes it happens that great coffee, instead of being sold at a premium, it's sold at a loss. Purely because we just lack the knowledge of what it costed to produce that great coffee. So now let's look at scalability from an aggregator perspective, or an intermediary, or an exporter. The greater the volume that they're going to have to move, the greater the chance that they're going to have to benchmark all of their prices against the C market. Sure, at a premium, 20 cents over, 50 cents over, but it will be attached to the C price. And the market is so volatile and so unpredictable during the collection time and right after the harvest that there is a huge problem with price risk exposure from these aggregators. And the only way for you to manage price risk exposure is to have access to financial tools like futures and options that allows you to manage the market volatility. Unless you have these tools, most probably at some point during the collection and harvest, the market is going to turn against you. So what happens is that surely an aggregator will be able to move volume, but in my experience, they will sell some coffee at a profit, they will sell some coffee breaking even, and then they will sell some coffee making a loss. And the hope is that the coffee that was sold at a premium will make up for what was sold at break even and at a loss. And that is not always the case. And that's why over time, we've all seen very successful cooperatives and exporters that just 1 year, they couldn't perform, and they may have gone all the way to belly up. I think it's because of laxes of tools and laxes of knowledge at origin that today, great coffee is not scalable. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Round of applause. So now we have a short moment where you two go head to head briefly. You have questions, you want to pick each other apart a little bit. You have but a moment or two. Questions, Katie?
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the fact that farms sell different levels of quality of coffee, because I think that that is an important aspect of all coffee farming that a lot of people don't understand, and that for some farmers, it may not make sense to focus on quality. That greatness in coffee may not necessarily be the answer for every farmer. But what I think is an answer is diversifying. And I think that farmers having a diversified sort of portfolio of things that they sell and make money on. You can't necessarily make a living selling coffee cherry once a year if you only own a couple hectares of land. So focusing on that, and then also joining cooperatives and having cooperatives that are also diversified in the products that they serve really can help quality grow. And that's something that you see in a roasting company. There aren't many roasting companies that have, one level of coffee quality that they end up selling. Roasters have to have a diversity in products in terms of coffee greatness as well. So I think that that can be
I'm going to pause you there,
a strategy.
because I need you to have a chance to rebut this.
Should I rebut?
You should rebut.
Okay. True. For some farmers, it just doesn't make sense to produce quality. But even when you do, you know that for a fact, none of your production will yield great quality. There will always be a part of your production that just is not going to cut it. It's just not going to make the score. And what happens to that coffee is my concern, because it really goes back to the percentage of how much quality are you producing? Is it 10% over 90% of commercial grade coffee? Or how can you really scale that percentage towards quality? How can you push it all the way? And I think that until we don't have the larger production of your coffee that probably is commercial to quality, then the chances are at the farmer level, you're probably gonna break even or lose on that on that investment. And the quality, the coffee with the higher premium, is just not gonna be able to cover up the entire investment. And that's mainly because of lack of knowledge. At the exporter level, again, I think that they have better understanding and they do want to diversify, and that's what they do. They hedge their bets, and everybody goes in saying, okay, 20% is gonna go to the highest ranking premiums market, and that's what my production is. But then they always go back and ask themselves, what are they gonna do with their commercial? Are they gonna make it or break it? And so that's the reason why it's hard to scale quality, because at the end of the day, I'm not sure you're gonna make enough profit to really go all the way for quality.
All right, thank you. So we're gonna pause from these two speakers now. We're gonna move to our next rebuttals. So could I please invite Nick? 4 minutes, it's all yours.
Thank you, James. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the retail side of stuff. And I've been thinking about this, actually, Katie, and I think this is all a bit of a ruse. I think we've been set up here. I'm not entirely sure it's possible for us to win this argument. And the reason I think that is because everyone here is a snob. I think everyone here are elitist snobs. And the problem with snobs is that they hate it. They hate it when something that they like becomes popular. When something that they like becomes popular or mainstream or more widespread. There's this thinking that once it becomes mainstream, it's no longer quality. If I go back 10 years ago, and looking at the scene back then, if you saw a bit of latte art on the top of a coffee, you'd say, it's a quality cup of coffee. There were all these snobs out there drinking their pretty little lattes, thinking, this is a quality coffee. But then everybody started doing latte art. Everyone was doing latte art. Now you can't sort of walk down a street without there being a bit of latte art in everybody's street corner. And all of a sudden, latte art is no longer a sign of quality. And the reason it's no longer a sign of quality is because everyone's a snob. So herein lies our problem, I think. I think we're being asked to argue that it's possible to scale quality, but this very statement is a contradiction, because once you've scaled quality, as far as everyone else is concerned, it's no longer quality because everyone's a snob. This, in a way, is a bit of an existential problem, I think, that we're facing here. The thing is, it is possible for something to be objectively high quality, regardless of whatever the fashion is of the day. And so just because we're not prepared to admit it, lest we seem a little bit out of step with sort of the prevailing fashions or trends, the fact is that it is possible for something to be objectively high quality. And so it is possible to scale that quality. I was in coming to Dublin yesterday, flew out of London, out of Stansted, and as I was in Stansted, obviously went to there's a Harrison Hall there, so obviously popped in. And I've got no vested interest in saying this because I'm no longer involved in Harrison Hall. You can't blame me at all for Harrison Hall anymore. But I had a coffee there, and it was genuinely a very good cup of coffee. Like, if you closed your eyes, you would objectively say that was an excellent cup of coffee. I even bumped into James Hoffmann, who was there, and James himself was drinking a cup of coffee. And I said to James, how's your coffee? And he said it was okay. Now,
I'm a neutral party in all of this. We should be very clear. I'm a neutral party. I can't be co-opted onto teams.
Everyone here knows that when James Hoffmann says something, it's okay. To us mere mortals, what he means is that it's fucking excellent. And the fact is that this is a business with over 40 shops. So according to James, he'd come in and he'd tried a coffee from a business, a manifestly scaled business, and in his view, paraphrasing, in his view, the coffee was fucking excellent. So, the people opposite me today would deny that very experience. They would deny, it was almost as if I wasn't even there. And in doing so, they're essentially denying my flesh and blood. So what I'm saying is, in conclusion, don't be a snob. No one likes snobs. It is possible to scale coffee. It's possible to sell good quality coffee. Yes, thank you.
I think it's best we stop you there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for those points, Nick. So I obviously am here representing the view that great coffee does not scale. And a lot of that is coming from my 25 years of experience in the industry, where I've seen exponential growth and market opportunity on the consumer side and increased awareness and appetite for specialty coffee in and among mainstream consumers, as we've talked about. And so there's a lot of growth and opportunity on our end of the value chain, and yet I have not seen, because I've always been a traveler to origin throughout all of my years of work, I haven't seen these values increase significantly enough to maintain coffee as a dignified means to support a livelihood. I haven't seen earning potential increase like we have seen happen on our end of the value chain. When you do a simple exercise of taking the composite decade price given from the ICO for coffee pricing, and you overlay that with a couple of targeted commodities that would inform the daily basket, right? So what it costs a loaf of bread, you look at wheat, you look at corn, you look at some fuel, eggs, proteins, what it costs people to support their livelihoods. You overlay the green coffee price that's been sold internationally, the decade composite price, because you don't want to have a data point for every year. The earning opportunity for coffee is stagnant, even down, for the last almost 40 years. All these other price indexes would show a northeasterly trend, meaning they're more expensive. Life is more expensive. So while the cost of living, food, education, clothing, fuel has gone up, and the cost to produce has certainly gone up. Inputs, again, fuel, labor, certainly. Increasing labor oversight and standards are expensive, they're not free. All these things are going up. The economic opportunity coffee represents is not going up. And I think many producer partners would attest to this. Furthermore, speaking to the 1.5 hectare average size of a coffee producer internationally, we depend on a system of commercial parallel partners to aggregate and bring that smallholder producer coffee together. These are disaggregated, many times uneducated, not informed smallholder producers who depend on these parallel commercial players to get their coffee to market. The more commercial players there are on the value chain, the harder it is to ensure that that value that needs to get to the people who produced it arrives. It's a problem we have. We don't know how to get coffee otherwise without these commercial players. So if coffee doesn't represent more economic opportunity in the places where it's produced, it's going to be very difficult to scale, because scale is wholly dependent upon working on systems that will aggregate and clearly disseminate best agricultural practices, cost of production economics, ethical standards, quality improving techniques. We need systems to help to disseminate this information. Today, those systems reside almost solely in the hands of large multinational traders, these parallel industry commercial partners. So after more than a generation of green coffee value stagnation, I'm afraid that coffee farming today is something to escape rather than aspire toward in many countries where it is produced. And so in order to scale it, great coffee, retaining people in coffee, I think we really need to change our relationship with the way people who produce it feel about this product that they have to try and commercialize. So what was commercially significant and valuable no longer is, I think, in many places where that was the case. And from a quality perspective, speaking from personal experience, many coffee companies grow using the capital of other people. And that capital oftentimes comes with a return on investment expectation. And when pressures start to be applied to ensure that you achieve that return on investment, you begin to cut corners regardless of whether or not that is consistent with your standards and values, because you're financially beholden to return that investment.
I'll stop you there. Thank you very much. Round of applause, please. Question?
Thanks, Chad. Question. I'm going to make a point first. Lucky for you, Chad, that you were talking about a part of the value chain that I know nothing about, but despite that ignorance, it's obviously incumbent on me to say that you're wrong. If I was to summarize a lot of your point, it seems that what you're saying is that business is not fair. That the systems that we have at the moment, that they are not distributing income in the way that it should, throughout the value chain. And it's hard for me to argue against that. I think it's a strong argument. It's a fair argument, but that's not an argument against scaling. That's just an argument saying that business isn't fair. What it is, and you said it a number of times, that you said that we need the systems, we need the sort of the pricing mechanism, we need this transparency that allows us to do things better. I couldn't agree more. That is incumbent on us, it's incumbent on many of us in this room to come up with those systems. But that's not to say that it's not possible. And it's not to say that it's not possible to scale great quality coffee by being a little bit more innovative in the way that we choose and look to do things. And frankly, one must feel that just the sheer strides that have been made by specialty coffee over the past 10 years, 20 years, even when you sort of think about the development, the evolution of the direct trade model. I mean, prior to that, a lot of these farmers were getting less than a commodity price, and now they are getting a better price. And all of this has come through scale and through the sort of the development and the evolution of the direct trade and specialty coffee model. So that's the point. I'm going to hand back over to you, Chad.
Rebuttal?
Yep. So, while Nick, I appreciate that a lot of these things are scalable if we can address systems or implement systems to disseminate and organize and aggregate and all this, but all that's going to require capital. And that's going to require that we can universally apply a higher value to this premium product. And I think we in this room collectively have a heap of work to do if what we're going to try to do is convince the consumer that a higher value coffee, a premium coffee, a great coffee is worth that much more. Because the way things are today, while you can indicate that you feel premiums are getting back to the way that producers are remunerated for this product, I would venture to say that in my experience, that's only a very small kind of tip of the quality pyramid producers who are getting the benefit of these premium sales. And so we are still very much in a position where there isn't extra money in the value chain to address and invest in these required systems that we scale, I think, would be dependent upon.
All right. So, thank you. Back to you. Could we bring the poll back up, please? So before we go to the next thing.